Daniel and Lillian Harper thought their life in rural Mississippi was safe and ordinary, but one October night, their world, and the lives of their 3 children, was shattered in a massacre so brutal it shocked the entire town and revealed secrets no one could have imagined. In a quiet, rural town nestled near the Mississippi River, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. Neighbors waved at each other over white picket fences, and children played in the fields until the sun dipped below the horizon. The Harper family had lived in the area for generations and were well known in the community. Daniel Harper, a respected contractor, spent long hours overseeing construction projects across the county, while his wife, Lillian, worked part-time at the local clinic, helping care for patients in need. Their 3 children, Emma, Caleb, and little Noah, were active in school and sports, often seen riding bikes together down the gravel lanes of their property. From the outside, their life seemed perfect, a picture of stability and family values that everyone admired. But one unusually warm October morning, an uneasy silence hung over the Harper farmhouse. The school bus arrived, but none of the children came running to greet it. Friends and neighbors tried calling, but the phones went unanswered. As hours passed, worry began to ripple through the community. By midday, a concerned neighbor decided to drive up the long, winding driveway, fearing something had gone terribly wrong. What they found inside the house would shock the entire town. The Harper family had been killed in a violent and deliberate attack. Every room told a story of sudden horror, and the atmosphere of safety that once defined the quiet neighborhood vanished instantly. Outside, the familiar landscape of farm fields and oak trees felt eerily still, as though the land itself mourned the loss of one of its most beloved families. The peaceful routine of the town would never be the same again. When police arrived at the Harper farmhouse, the scene inside was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Officers moved cautiously through the home, their eyes scanning every corner for clues, but the devastation was immediate and undeniable. Daniel, Lillian, and their 3 children lay lifeless in their beds and living spaces. The attack had been swift and precise, leaving no signs of a struggle or forced entry. Windows were intact, doors remained locked from the inside, and nothing appeared to have been stolen. Everything about the scene suggested that the family had known their attacker, that this was not the work of a random intruder, but someone with access and familiarity. Detectives carefully documented the rooms, noting details that would later become critical to understanding the crime. The kitchen was untouched, the family dog safely locked in the garage, seemingly ignored by the perpetrator. Officers moved from bedroom to bedroom, their steps slow, almost reverent, as they tried to piece together the timeline of the night's events. Neighbors began to gather outside the yellow police tape, murmuring theories and speculating about motives. The town was paralyzed by shock and disbelief, unable to reconcile the violence with the image of the Harper family they had known for years. Forensic teams found evidence suggesting the attack had been planned and executed with chilling efficiency. The absence of forced entry, the selective nature of the violence, and the untouched valuables all pointed to an insider. The quiet, familiar farmhouse, once a symbol of safety and warmth, had been transformed into a crime scene that would haunt the small Mississippi town for years to come. The question on everyone's mind was simple, yet terrifying. Who could have done this, and why? As investigators delved deeper into the Harper family's lives, they began to uncover unsettling details beneath the surface of what had seemed like a perfect household. Daniel Harper's construction business, once thriving, had recently suffered significant financial setbacks. He had lost a major contract, and the stress of mounting bills and overdue payments weighed heavily on him. Friends and neighbors recalled seeing Daniel unusually tense in the weeks leading up to the tragedy, often withdrawing from social gatherings and spending long hours alone at the office or at home. Lillian, too, appeared different to those close to the family. She had grown quieter, distant, and preoccupied, and some friends mentioned she had expressed concern over Daniel's increasing stress and unexplained absences. Phone records added another layer of mystery. Daniel had been in contact with an unknown number late at night, far outside his usual routine. Tracing the number led investigators to a woman living in a nearby county, someone Daniel had apparently been meeting secretly. This revelation created more questions than answers. The timing of the calls, combined with the sudden, violent deaths of his family, suggested there may have been hidden tensions or secrets no one in the town suspected. Complicating matters further, the phone stopped transmitting hours before the estimated time of death, leaving a gap in the timeline. If Daniel had been involved in any way, how could his phone have gone dark? And if he had no connection to the murders, what had prompted these clandestine communications? Every discovery pulled the investigation in multiple directions, painting a picture of a family whose outward appearance of normalcy masked hidden stress, secret dealings, and relationships that might have been far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. 3 days after the shocking murders of the Harper family, a new development further unsettled investigators and the community. A storage shed on a remote piece of property owned by Daniel Harper had been destroyed in a sudden fire. Firefighters who arrived on the scene suspected arson immediately. The blaze had been intense, leaving only charred remnants behind. Inside the ashes, investigators discovered melted electronics, burnt documents, and fragments of clothing, all of which appeared to have been deliberately destroyed. Traces of accelerants, most likely gasoline, suggested that the fire had been carefully planned and set to erase evidence rather than being an accident. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station provided a tantalizing but frustrating clue. The video showed a pickup truck matching the description of Daniel's vehicle filling a container the evening before the murders. The driver's face was obscured by a baseball cap, making identification difficult, but the timing and the unusual purchase of liquid raised suspicions. Police began to wonder whether the fire and the murders were connected. Had the attacker planned both in advance to cover their tracks? Or was the fire an opportunistic attempt to destroy evidence after the killings? The implications were chilling. Whoever committed the murders had knowledge of the property, of Daniel's routines, and likely of the shed itself. The methodical nature of the fire mirrored the careful planning seen in the house, further confirming that the killer had acted with intention and precision. Each new piece of evidence deepened the mystery, drawing investigators closer to an understanding of a crime far more complex and calculated than anyone in the small Mississippi town could have anticipated. During a meticulous re-examination of the Harper farmhouse, forensic teams made a shocking discovery that changed the course of the investigation. While combing through the bedrooms and closets, they found signs that Caleb, the middle child, had survived the initial attack. Hidden behind a small closet door, he had managed to crawl to a corner, desperately trying to shield himself from the violence that had claimed the rest of his family. Tragically, his injuries were severe, and he succumbed to them hours later, but the evidence of his brief survival offered the investigators critical clues. Inside the closet, faint scratches were found along the walls and floor, indicating a struggle. More importantly, a partial fingerprint was discovered, one that did not belong to any member of the Harper family. Laboratory analysis linked it to Mark Harper, Daniel's younger brother, whose criminal record included minor offenses but nothing violent. The connection sent shockwaves through the investigation. Mark had always been present in the family's social circle, someone trusted enough to have access to their home. Further digging revealed a pattern of tension and resentment. Mark had recently been seen arguing with Daniel at a family gathering, and neighbors reported noticing a growing hostility between the brothers over financial matters. Investigators began to consider a theory that had once seemed impossible. The murders were not the work of a random outsider, but of someone within the family itself. The partial fingerprint, combined with the survival evidence from Caleb, suggested that the massacre was not only premeditated but carried out by someone who knew the Harper family intimately, someone whose motives were likely fueled by jealousy, anger, and greed. The small Mississippi town, already traumatized, now faced the horrifying reality of betrayal within a family. As the investigation progressed, detectives uncovered more evidence pointing to a hidden motive behind the Harper family massacre. Life insurance policies taken out on Daniel, Lillian, and the children became a central focus. Investigators discovered that these policies had been recently updated, and in a suspicious move, Mark Harper, Daniel's younger brother, was listed as a secondary beneficiary under unusual circumstances. The amounts were substantial, enough to raise questions about Mark's intentions. Bank records further revealed large and unexplained transfers between the brothers, suggesting financial dealings that had not been disclosed to the family. Mark's financial troubles came into sharper focus as investigators learned he had accumulated significant gambling debts over the previous months. These debts placed him under pressure from dangerous lenders who had little patience for delays or excuses. Every piece of evidence painted a picture of a man cornered by his circumstances, potentially willing to take drastic measures to secure money quickly. Cell tower data placed Mark's phone near the Harper farmhouse on the night of the murders, contradicting his initial claims of being home alone. His story shifted multiple times when questioned, each version less credible than the last. Investigators began piecing together a timeline. Mark arrived late at night, entered the house using a spare key, and carried out the killings with chilling efficiency. The storage shed fire, previously thought to be an unrelated incident, now appeared to be a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence linked to the crime. All signs pointed to greed, desperation, and premeditation. The investigation was uncovering the horrifying reality that the massacre was not just a random act of violence, but a calculated betrayal driven by personal gain. After weeks of intensive investigation, law enforcement officials finally moved to arrest Mark Harper. The town, still reeling from the shock of the massacre, watched as the younger Harper brother was led from his home in handcuffs. The arrest came after a meticulous accumulation of evidence that investigators believed left little doubt about his involvement. Forensic evidence, cell tower data, bank records, and the partial fingerprint found in Caleb's hiding place all pointed directly to him. The prosecution presented a compelling case. They laid out a timeline showing Mark's movements on the night of the murders, including his arrival at the Harper farmhouse, entry with a spare key, and the execution of the attack while the family slept. They argued that the storage shed fire was not coincidental, but a calculated attempt to destroy evidence of his crime. Financial motives, past conflicts, and gambling debts were cited as the driving forces behind his actions. The courtroom was tense as the jury listened to the evidence, understanding the magnitude of the crime and the careful planning that had gone into it. Mark's defense team challenged the prosecution, emphasizing that much of the evidence was circumstantial. They suggested that someone else could have used Mark's phone or vehicle to commit the murders, attempting to cast doubt on the narrative constructed by law enforcement. The trial dragged on for months, keeping the small Mississippi town in suspense and capturing the attention of the wider state. In the end, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. The sentence confirmed what many in the community already suspected. Mark Harper had betrayed his own family, driven by desperation and greed. The arrest and conviction brought a measure of closure, but the trauma of the tragedy lingered, leaving a permanent scar on the town and its residents. Years after Mark Harper was sentenced, the case continued to draw attention as journalists and true crime enthusiasts revisited the details. One investigative reporter uncovered new information that cast a different light on the events leading up to the Harper family massacre. The mysterious woman Danielle Harper had been communicating with turned out to be connected to a regional financial fraud investigation. Danielle had apparently been cooperating with authorities, quietly gathering evidence against a network of criminals operating across several counties. The discovery suggested that the storage shed fire might not have been primarily about insurance money or covering a crime of passion, but could have contained critical documents tied to this ongoing investigation. This revelation raised difficult questions about Mark Harper's role. Some experts speculated that he had acted alone, motivated solely by greed and resentment, while others believed he may have been manipulated or pressured by individuals involved in the fraud ring. His financial desperation and personal animosity toward Daniel may have made him a convenient pawn in a larger scheme, a theory that added layers of complexity to an already tragic story. The small Mississippi town, still haunted by the memories of that October night, struggled to process the implications. Families spoke quietly about the Harper tragedy, and the farmhouse remained an empty reminder of the horror that had occurred. Local authorities emphasized that, despite new theories, Mark Harper's actions were deliberate and devastating, and no other accomplices had been proven to exist. Ultimately, the case became more than a story of murder and betrayal. It became a cautionary tale of greed, secrecy, and the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most ordinary lives. The Harper family's deaths left an indelible mark, a grim chapter in Mississippi history that continues to provoke questions, speculation, and sore.